The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Okay, so hi Shannon and Dr. Doreen. Just wanted to start by thanking you both. You're amazing. God bless you both. My question is, how can I reduce the time my 4-year-old spends trying to make letters with his hands and arms and even talking about the ABCs? He'll say things like P is for Papa, M is for Mom, C is for Cat, etc. He's learning to read some words and even write like 10 different words like dog, mom, wow, dad, etc. That's the good part of all this. If I can give him a coloring book, he'll color for a few seconds, then starts to write letters. And a lot of times they don't make any words, like he'll write H, B, C, P, D, etc. If I give him a notebook, he writes words that can be read and a lot that can't be read too, forever if I would let him. I know there's some really good things about this, and I'm just really stressing thinking about the first thing my 4-year-old talks and thinks about when he wakes up is letters. And she says help with 3 Ps. And sorry for the long question. Never apologize for your questions, and we love more details, so that's all good. And she says, God bless you guys again.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. The good news is I don't think I've ever had a child who has this, sort of attachment to letters who hasn't done well. So let's start with that. It's a good thing. Don't let it freak you out or scare you. It's a good thing because your child is probably going to develop hyperlexia and is going to be a child who can read and write and just loves the concreteness of the alphabet, the letters, the fact that there's a start and an end, and they're very concrete and nothing abstract about them. So, and that's perfectly fine. What you do is, a lot of what you've been doing is good in terms of you will, essentially, you're going to increase the duration of time doing other activities. So like you said, for instance, he's coloring, set a timer, and even if you increase it daily by 10 seconds or 30 seconds more of coloring, then, within a week it's a few more minutes longer. Within a month it's 10 or 15 minutes longer, and you just do a gradual shaping of other appropriate behaviors that don't involve just letters. However, I would allow the sort of self-stimulation of using letters, but I would restrict it to a time frame. So you narrow the time during which these things are allowed to be done. In other words, you'll have a very set schedule for him, and initially, because he's doing it all the time, you'll start with, let's say, he's 4 years old, so let's just schedule about 12 hours of his day, and in the 12-hour period, I would probably say every hour he should be allowed maybe, let's say, the first and the third 15 minutes. So he's getting 30 minutes of some sort of letter type thing, so free operant conditions. In other words, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants with the letters. He can write them, he can color them, whatever, but it's restricted to 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off, pretty much all day long. That's one schedule. I mean, you can do any schedule that works for you. It doesn't have to be the same every hour. It really doesn't. It's just a matter of getting control over the time frame and getting him to understand that these times you are allowed, these times you're not allowed. And initially, the times that he is allowed are going to be higher, so he's going to have a lot more allowed allowed time than not allowed time. And then gradually you're going to reverse that schedule. Very, very gradually. You're going to reduce the times that are allowed and increase the times that are not allowed. And then, so sort of the red flag times and the green flag times. And then but always as you decrease this over a long period of time, let's say 6 months, but keep in mind that you're never going to really eliminate it because you want to keep it. It's a high reinforcer for him, and it'll actually end up becoming useful. It's only considered self-stimulatory in nature right now because it's so obsessive, it's so long and lengthy and time-consuming that it deprives him of attending to other things. Once you start to get it to a controllable level, he'll actually start attending to other things more as well and engaging in other things. So it won't really be negative or self-stimulatory in nature anymore. It'll just be reinforcing. And it'll be important to maintain that period of time where he's doing letter activities. Don't worry about the fact that he writes letters that don't produce words. Trust me, he will teach himself reading, writing. He will go heavily into the use of letters. You won't even have to do it. In fact, by the time he's ready for school, he'll be way ahead of his peers in terms of academically understanding letters and labels and all this sort of stuff. Don't be afraid of buying him stuff that's going to encourage that.
Okay.
Like things that have blocks with letters on them that go with objects, or matching cards that have 3-letter words and objects. Don't be afraid of that. This is something he's good at. This is something that he wants to do. Let him do it. All you're trying to prevent is him doing it 24/7.
Okay.
And so you're limiting the time frame.
Very interesting question here. My 3-year-old son is constantly talking about letters, trying to make letters with his hands, arms, and legs. If I give him paper to write letters, I make him write the alphabet and sing the song after so he can write his letters, but in a more appropriate way. But then later on, he'll say stuff like M is for monkey, C is for cat. When he sees the letters somewhere, and even when he's not seeing them, he has a wooden letter and he is constantly asking me to give them to him so he can use them. But what I do is use them as reinforcement when we're doing some kind of learning activity. My question is, how can I minimize the time that he's spending talking about letters and trying to make them with his arms and legs? But in the same way, I don't want to just stop completely because I feel like he'll be too anxious and stressed if I do that. Which is the right way to do it? Sometimes I tell him to stop and give him paper and then write his letters there. Plus, he's very calm when he's doing that. And we had a couple of people writing in about
Letters,
and somebody asked me, is that hyperlexia or is that something different when they're obsessed with letters, and is that something different than hyperlexia?
It's definitely, well, okay, so, I mean, gosh, I have so many things to say about this.
We should answer their question before mine. How rude of me that I photobombed, I question bombed. Okay, let's answer her question, then we'll talk about hyperlexia.
We'll talk about this in a minute. I mean, the good news is, so let's start with this. The good news is whenever I have a child who's obsessing with numbers or letters, they tend to be highly intelligent.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm just throwing that out because there's no study on this, but it's just my gut feeling that I think the majority of my kids who have been obsessed with numbers or letters end up having very high intelligence on their tests. So that's good.
So it's like there's a laser. We just got to figure out where to point it, right?
Yes, and I'll talk about that.
Okay.
And in regards to your question, which actually does kind of fit into this, is that hyperlexic kids as a whole tend to be higher IQ as well. Like hyperlexic kids always really do well because they are so hyperlexic, and we can use writing and reading to prompt them for a number of things. So, and hyperlexia is just the being able to identify sort of the symbolism of letters earlier than typical. So very good readers. These are the kids who teach themselves to read at age 3 or 2. Extremely high functioning kids. But that doesn't necessarily mean, not all kids who are obsessed with letters become hyperlexic, but I would say probably the majority do. Okay, so now what I would suggest you do, and it's funny that parents are just so intuitive about this stuff, and they just so get it, like no other, people in the field, the professionals never get it the way a parent gets it.
You're the only person who thinks that, and that's one of the reasons why you're so wonderful. Because nobody else gives us any credit.
These are things I learned from parents and from having seen thousands of kids, Like one of my kids, if I mentioned to you just recently, one of my kids who was obsessed with letters, actually is now recovered, said, I do this when I'm overwhelmed, you know, and mom is pointing to that. It's absolutely true. You're right. A lot of our kids do the self-stimulatory stuff they do when they're overwhelmed. And that's why I've always said the word self-stimulatory is kind of a silly word. It should be more like self-soothing.
Yeah.
Because most of the reason our kids do these activities is because they're trying to calm down, you know? So I also don't think you should necessarily take it away, but I do agree that you should make it very sort of appear normal, let's say, you know, fit into his or her life and society, and you should limit the time frame. That's always the success factor. So with a lot of my kids, they become very obsessed with something, and what we do is we permit it during a specific time frame and not permit it during other time frames. So when, depending on your child's functioning level, if it occurs outside of that time, then they are either losing tokens or, you know, losing access to a toy or some sort of response cost. And the rules are that you will be reinforced actually initially, so that the child realizes, well, there's a big difference. I get reinforcers if I do it from this time to this time, and I lose reinforcers if I do it anytime outside of that. Now, when I say from this time to this time, if your child has any comprehension of time, obviously that's great. If they don't, it's just, you could use things like, you know, at recess, before breakfast, you know, after lunch, or whatever it is, and you give a time frame and you actually set a timer. And during that time, initially you can let the child go to town on it, you know, do whatever they want to do, but then you want to start to shape it to a more appropriate type of thing, like for instance what you've done. But hey, if your child's so much into this, like just start teaching them to write. Get them those tracing pads that actually start having the child write letters, then start having words. Get them one of the electronic, what are they called? Frog.
The leapfrog, the leap pads, and that.
Yes,
we gave some great ones away at Christmas time where an interactive reader where they can write things.
Exactly.
And it tells them when they've gone off the line.
Exactly.
And it asks them questions.
And how wonderful that you know, your child's obsessed with something that they're going to be doing for the rest of their lives, reading and writing.
Yes.
So get
it's
them
a quality
into that.
problem. It's a quality, but it's a problem nonetheless. I can understand why she's concerned.
Now, I think that you said something else about the child holds or touches letters, or what
there's a
was that?
wooden letter
right.
that he wants to hold.
Right.
Let me find a place in that.
So I want to come back to that issue, which is kind of, it's just a different aspect of the same thing. This is whenever you have your child wanting to hold something, it's a very much it's a lower way of saying, like a smaller version of hoarding. And this is a safety factor. This comes from anxiety. So this is with little kids when they are carrying around their blanket or their stuffed animal.
And this is why my garage is a mess too, right?
Yeah.
This is it.
Well, maybe. But I mean, hoarding comes from, hoarding is the absolute extreme. The minimal version of it with every child, they usually have a favorite object, a favorite stuffed animal, a favorite whatever, and you know, everything depends on having that with them. And that's just security. That's just a security blanket. That's all it is. And so if your child's just wanting to hold that, then I would think you should get them a very small letter and that they can actually put in their pocket.
Okay.
And if they get very anxious, they can put their hand in their pocket and feel it. I also think that over time this object will change. I don't think it could very much be just a letter because of the fact that your child is very good with letters. Like so, but it doesn't matter. I mean, at this point, this is the object, and so you want to be able to allow your child to have that. However, if they're rubbing their hands on the object, then it could also be a sensory need. Like you really need to figure out what the reason is for each of the behaviors and not assume that it's just because it's a letter.
But I like the idea that, you know, let him have it in a really appropriate size so he can have it in his pocket, so that we don't have to be taking away the comfort from it, and that can be worked on over time.
I mean, a lot of people have, what is it, rabbit's feet, a rabbit's foot on their keychain or something, or even if you, I mean, how many people will play with something in their hands, right?
They even make something called a worry stone. That's a flat little stone that you can rub with your thumb. It's called a worry stone.
That's right.
So I love that. And if you can find a small letter, then he could have that, and it could be in the pocket, and he could stick his hand in his pocket whenever he needed to.
That's right.
What a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I love that you're on our side.
Oh gosh. Did I not see? I've learned everything from the parents.
Okay, next question. How do you work on getting them to talk about things other than what they're obsessed about? I'm grateful he's talking, but I don't want to talk about Minecraft all day. Oh, sister, are we related? Because I feel you on this one. So, Dr. Grandpichet, how do we get them to talk about things that they're not preferred topics?
Right. I mean, and let me just join the Minecraft thing here, because my son, as you know, became the guru of Minecraft. So, like anything else, why don't you just use a timer?
Okay.
And first, teach your child to identify when they're talking about something that only they are interested in. So, for instance, you make a list and you'll say, "So, tell me some of the things you like to talk about." Minecraft, what else? List them, right? And then some of the things I might like to talk about, and that might be in itself a difficult task for your child because of the lack of theory of mind. Don't know. So you help your child identify those things, right? And you list those. And then you actually set a timer, and then you say, "Hey, let's just talk." And your child starts to talk, and you'll time whenever he's talking about one of the subjects on his list versus yours, which most likely will start out with nothing on yours. And so you'll stop him and you'll say, "Look, we have to have like an equal amount of time. So we've talked this much, like, I don't know, 1.5 minutes about your stuff. So now it's time to talk about my stuff, something off of my list. So let's do that." And then you do it, and the timer goes off, and you'll be like, "Oh, great, now we can talk another 1.5 or 3 minutes about something on your list. You pick it." And that's how you practice it, and it seems kind of rote initially, but believe me, your child will start to become aware of the fact that, "Oh, I've been talking about my own issue. I should probably talk about something that they're interested in." Then it's a fabulous opening to teaching stuff like, "Well, ask me what are some things," like, so that when he goes to other children, he's able to identify what are the things they're interested in. And that gives you the opportunity to teach inferences. It gives you the opportunity to teach the child to read facial expression, and you can actually then go more advanced and start to pretend like you're bored or something like that. So he learns to minimize the amount of time on Minecraft and to realize, "Oh, she looks like she's bored. Maybe I should shorten and go to her subject." There's so much stuff you can teach from that point forward.
I love this idea, though, of the visual of the 2 sheets of paper, because I've been doing a thing with Jem where I'll say to him, you can tell me 3 things about a video game, and that's it, and then we're done for the next hour. And that was very effective at stopping the endless Minecraft conversation, but we end up doing that over and over, and we don't ever progress past that. But I love the idea of the visual so that he can see the equality in it.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect of seeing the equality in it. Yeah, you have to balance it, because it's not, and there's more than that. It's about the child beginning to see past himself.
Yeah.
See, with our kids, they grow up, and we're very, the better trained a therapist you become as a mom, you become more and more, you allow the child more and more, it's egocentric. Like, you are paying so much attention to his issues, and at some point you really need to teach the child to pay attention to your issues. And so that is a huge lesson, and that comes with the whole theory of mind, empathy, everything. And this, being able to put them side by side is the very beginning of, I took care of you, you have to take care of me, you have to give me equal coverage. But you should it goes a little bit further, and it's more about teaching the child to kind of recognize that they're not being a good friend if they're not taking care of you. And that produces the whole cycle of how should I treat this other person? How do I like to be treated?
Yeah. So important. I love all the ramifications from this that we get. So important that, because I think a lot of times we can poo-poo and go, oh, well, I'll just let them go on, but it really is not a service to them if we do that.
And if you go on skills, if you're a skills user in the, I believe this would be in the, I'm not sure. I'm thinking it's in the social curriculum, but I'm not sure. I think this falls under social conversation, but all the lessons I just mentioned are in skills. I don't know if we have it in the visual format I said, but exchanging communication or all that sort of stuff is in skills, and you can, staying on topic or changing topic, paying attention to the other individual's facial expression, all that sort of stuff is there.
Yeah, really remarkable. That social language curriculum is insanely wonderful.
It's good stuff.
It's great for anybody to read through. I'm still learning things from it. Who am I kidding? I learned, past tense. I'm learning from it. Okay, longer question. My son is 5 years and 10 months old. He recently became obsessed with looking out the windows, mainly watching cars coming and going from our neighborhood. This happened before, and unfortunately I did not get a chance to take data on it, but it did eventually fade and then go away completely. Now it's back. We did an FBA. It's definitely automatic reinforced. Last time we did a lot of blocking, but this time around when it started back up, we just let him do it because it's not hurting anyone. My question is, should I continue to let him do it? It's only happening at home, and besides him not requesting to open the blinds or curtains, it's normally not a problem. On occasion, he will have meltdowns when certain cars leave the area screaming, "Black car, time to go bye-bye," while moving towards our front door and attempting to leave. Him requesting is an easy fix, and we are fading our prompts. Now he is almost independently requesting to look out the window. So interesting,
it's kind of
right?
Cute. Yeah. I mean, to me, if he's to me, he seems bored. To me, it seems like this is something that's of interest to him, and he's almost interacting with it. He's kind of curious about what's going on out there. I don't know if he has enough activity inside. So I guess the few things that I would point out about this is that make sure, I would probably leave it alone as long as it doesn't increase in time. So in other words, limit it to a certain healthy time frame. Like, you don't want your child looking out the window at cars for half an hour every day or an hour every day. It's okay if they do it in 2 15-minute segments, I suppose, but not if it's like a straight half hour where they won't do anything else. Make sure the child doesn't become rigid in terms of avoiding everything else when they're doing this. So like, make sure you can interrupt it by saying, okay, it's time to go now. Or if he starts to freak out because you're interrupting it, then you realize that it's becoming a little bit too addictive or a little bit too intense for him, and that's when you need to start intervening. So just keep it at a healthy level. Now, that aside, why is he doing this? When we say you've done an FBA and it shows that it's automatic reinforcement, it basically means he's enjoying it internally. Okay, he's enjoying it internally, but why? Like, what aspect of it is interactive for him or is entertaining? I just feel like he has a certain level of boredom. Maybe he's into cars. If he's into cars, why not use this as an opportunity to, get him to watch other car type shows, or maybe you can look at cars online and learn about them, or maybe you can have pretend play activities that involve cars, or if he's he's using his colors when it comes to cars, maybe he can describe cars and through that learn a lot more attributes. So take the positives, absolutely, but just make sure that you're limiting it so that it doesn't start to become an obsessive behavior.
Okay, can I tell you what I'm worried about?
Yes,
the
please.
Sentence that she says, on occasion he will have meltdowns when certain cars leave the area screaming, "Black car, time to go bye-bye," while moving towards our front door and attempting to leave.
Yes,
that's
good point.
Part that worries me, because and of course I'm curious why why is it the black car leaving and he says time to go bye-bye? Like he wants to go bye-bye with that car.
But does it say the car is leaving?
It looks like the car, she says, is leaving the area. So if a car is leaving the neighborhood, then he thinks it's time to go and is going to the door.
Right.
And he's 5, almost 6. So at some point he's going to be able to get that door open, I'm worried.
Yes. So of course that's a safety issue and you need to be very, very careful with that. Secondly, you need to, clearly he's exhibiting some sort of anxiety about the car leaving, which I think is a great opportunity for you to actually teach him that cars come and go and that there's a world of cars. And you can do that with toy cars, obviously, that you can show him that black car is going bye-bye, but then another black car will come, that sort of thing. But as I said, you need to be very, very cautious that he's not opening the door and running after the car.
Yeah.
You also do need to teach him the danger in cars. So that, if he has access to a car and if he's in love with cars, he realizes that he can't run in front of them or something.
Yeah.
All of those are given facts. But again, so everything has two sides to it.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't become obsessive or dangerous, then you can take his interest in cars and develop it into other things.
And I hope you make sure that you get a really good high lock on that door that he can't open, because if he's that interested in it, I want to make sure that he can't get out.
Well, yeah, and I don't know, the problem with locks obviously is that a lot of times people
Forget,
right?
It's human error.
Right. I think you can definitely have the whole handle moved up all the way up so that he's not reaching it right now. So the whole gizmo is up high on top. But they have these very good devices now that are automatically on the door that'll beep if the door's open.
Right, the little alarms. And they're fairly inexpensive.
It's a little box. Yeah, very inexpensive. I think they're less than $20, and it's a little box like that, and you put it on the door, and it will beep when it's opened. So it's sort of a magnetic contact, and that's a perfect way as well of tracking things. But you also want to teach him. You have to teach him, not just prevent it, but teach him that he can see those things and that he shouldn't run after them. And I think the running after it is his anxiety that this car is leaving and he will never see it again. And I think you need to teach him that there are many cars coming and so on and so forth. Like, use the anxiety to actually figure out how to calm him down. What is it that's causing him anxiety?
I was really struck by something last night. I mentioned I went to the Unified Theater performance last night. We had them on the show yesterday, and Wyatt was in the performance, and it was so lovely to go and see. And the kids were great, and what a wonderful program, so impressive. But there was something that happened shortly after the show started that was just so interesting to me on my street where I live. There was a small baby who was in the audience who was fine as we're waiting for the lights to go down. The lights went down, baby is fine. The kids start to come out on the stage and they're starting to talk, and the baby starts to fuss. And the mom is, trying everything, and it's a child that's just basically been walking for a couple of months, and she's, trying to keep the baby quiet because, and the baby is fussing and, and wants to go. And finally she went and sat in the aisle and was trying to, and the baby was not having any of it, and made so much noise that finally the mom left the theater. And eventually at some point she sneaked in a little bit later, and there was a part at the end of the show where they had all the kids who were in the show come and sit on the stage, and they showed a beautiful slideshow that was like the curtain call of the process that they had gone through, and it was amazing and it was wonderful, and they had live music to play during it. But at some point the mom came back in with the baby, and the baby walked out into the middle of the stage and was just the happiest child. She wanted to be on the stage with those kids because her sister was on there. And it didn't matter. We didn't know that in the audience. It could have been that she wanted a drink. It could have been that she didn't like being in the dark. But then once you saw that baby on the stage, she was thrilled. And as they were going around and giving flowers to each one of the kids, the baby went over and held its hand out like, it's my turn. And her body language was, and then she went over and wanted to take the microphone. This was a child who wanted to be there in the mix. But it would have been all too easy for us to misread it and say, oh, the baby just can't hang for the performance. Not at all. She was fine.
To be in the performance.
But and it really reminded me about, until our kids have functional communication to tell us what they want.
But it is like when they're babies. It's just like when they're babies. Your child does something. With my kids, I know I would sit there and I'd give a million options. I'd be like, yes, black car, bye-bye, or
Yeah.
but what, so what? Another car's coming back, and I'd keep talking until I'd see my child's reaction change, and then kind of like, oh, okay. And I think we can't make assumptions.
Right.
We have to recognize that our children are behaving the way they are for some reason.
Yeah.
They're trying to tell
Exactly.
us something, you know,
Yeah.
and it's important to try to figure out what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the meantime, especially whenever we look at elopement and wandering, that a lot of, not all the time, sometimes it's to get away from something, but sometimes it's to go to something.
Definitely. It's to go after something because they like the way it looks or is, or they don't want it to disappear, or they don't have the concept of object permanence, that something's gone, but it's not gone for good. You know,
Right,
it's still it's
right.
permanent, it's there. And those types of things are very, very important because they can be pretty disturbing. I mean,
Yeah.
this is like what leads to kids who have separation anxiety. They think when their mom walks away, she's gone for good.
Yeah.
The concept of I will see her again in 10 minutes doesn't exist. And, you know, you should teach your child those things that will help them calm down quite a bit.
They've written in some more. She says, my son
Right.
picks that same black car because it's the same not make model as my car. He is also obsessed with another car that is navy blue that is the same not model of my car. Even though our cars look different, he has managed to figure out that they are all the same make.
Interesting.
Same make, not model. I see. So it's the same type of car, but not the same model of the car. Interesting.
Right. So this is what I love about our kids. So like it's a Honda or something,
Right.
or like it's a Mercedes or whatever it is. And so basically your child that's very interesting. That could mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
You know, I'm wondering if first of all, I have so many thoughts. I love our kids. They're so fascinating. They're just so
And
fascinating.
someday you're going to be able to look back and talk about this and hopefully know
exactly what it is.
And he'll be able to tell you. But until then,
Absolutely. So, first of all, so clearly your child is one of those kids who memorizes very interesting facts. So, you know, get him engaged in other aspects of sorting. This is basically sorting. You know, these are all Mercedes, these are all Hondas, these are all whatever, Toyotas, and so on and so forth. And that's cool. That's an activity. And it's actually a cool activity for later in life. Like I can see my son now who's 15 and all of his buddies, it's all about cars, right? Because they're at the age where they're getting cars, and my son knows, I throw out a name, he'll know exactly what year, model, whatever it is, you know, it's crazy. So that's an activity that your child could engage in separately. The fact that it's the same make as your car, I don't know if he's artistic. Does he like the logo? Is that what's attracting him? Or is it simply that it is your car? Does he panic because he thinks your car is leaving? I don't know. There's so many different... Are you there when he panics like that?
Yeah. Has your car ever been driven away with you at home? Like, and what attached that happened?
Right,
you know,
right.
Did he miss out on something because the car drove away once? You wonder.
There is a reason, though, that would make sense to us, that he's sort of trying to go. It could be something as simple as a puzzle piece is missing now, because all the cars with this particular make are in the neighborhood and all is fine, and now it's gone and there's an empty hole there. It could be something as simple as that. You really do need to find out what it is, because you need to be able to teach him that it's okay.
Right.
So that he doesn't try to run after it.
Right.
You know, and that's very important. So
our jargon for today, you can see it there on the board, is perseveration. Now, I don't know about you. I probably heard this term before my child was diagnosed with autism, but I don't think I dwelled on it. And it wasn't something that I heard people use in conversation. It just wasn't. I always heard that we want to persevere, right? That being able to persevere was something that was good and a skill that would serve you well. Then suddenly when my son was diagnosed with autism, I would hear people talk about he's perseverating. So what does this mean? And is it something negative, or is it something positive? Or is it like a lot of things, it could be what it could be? All right, our actual definition for perseveration is a failure of the brain to switch ideas along with the social context, often resulting in a pathological and persistent repetition of words or gestures after they have ceased to be socially relevant or appropriate. Ooh, that doesn't sound very good, right? The very wordy definition, and you get bogged down, oh, it's a failure of the brain. Oh my gosh, sounds like a really horrible, horrible thing. Let's take a look at our working definition so that we get a little bit clearer picture. Perseveration, the functionless repetition of a behavior or response, such as repeating a word or a phrase or making a gesture when it's no longer appropriate. So when people write in and ask us, what's the difference between, having a passion for something and perseverating on it, we really are looking at, it's not a bad thing to be passionate about something. Let's say that you love Buzz Lightyear, because a lot of our kids do. They love Buzz Lightyear, and it's something that, they're playing and they're talking to other kids and they're talking about Buzz Lightyear. That's being passionate about something. They see Buzz Lightyear on the television and they're excited about it. We don't want to squash that passion, right? We never want to squash passion. But for some of our kids, they can get into a loop where all they can talk about is Buzz Lightyear or fill in the blank of whatever it might be, and they can't get out of it. So they'll go up to another child and they'll start to talk about Buzz Lightyear, and there's a portion of the conversation that serves a purpose. They're talking about Buzz Lightyear to the other kid, and the other kid goes, I love Buzz Lightyear too, and it's wonderful. But then the other child might move on to something else, and sometimes an individual who's perseverating can't. They get stuck in it, and now it's no longer serving a purpose, and it becomes more of a liability to them. So when we're talking about perseveration, this is what we're talking about, when it no longer ceases to serve a purpose or be socially relevant. Now, are there ways that we can channel perseveration into something that's productive? Absolutely. We've talked a lot on the show about how sometimes our kids have strengths that they get a little perseverative about, and if we can channel that properly into something that's meaningful to them and serves a purpose. If you look at people who are the most successful in life, they're people who are really passionate and focused on something. But on the other side of that, besides channeling the passion, we have to also make sure that we teach and plug in flexibility so that there is the ability to stop. I think even with those people who are wildly successful at something because they're really passionate about it, if they don't have a way that they can turn that off from time to time, it can become stressful. So perseveration is something that we really want to be careful about, that we really want to be mindful. We want to channel it when possible, and we want to really work on flexibility and reward somebody being able to get off of the thing that they're perseverating on and go to something else. Our kids can perseverate on so many different things, and it can affect their life in so many ways. When my son was little, he perseverated on vacuum cleaners. If a vacuum cleaner came out while we were doing anything, everything else was over, because he was going to just be about the vacuum cleaner, and we would have to put it away for him to get moved on to something else. And even then, if he knew where it was, he would perseverate on it. Same thing with drains. Any type of a drain, if we were walking around the street and there was a drain, he would focus on that. If he was in the bathtub, he would be focused on the drain. If he was in the bathroom, he was focused on where does the water go down, which makes it hard to potty train an individual. We worked on all of those things, and it can get very creative when you work on perseveration. One of the things that we did when he was 3.5, we gave him a camera and let him go and take pictures of the world that he wanted to take. And I don't know why to this day, but he went and took pictures of a bunch of drains, and then he didn't need to perseverate on them anymore. Don't know why. It won't be that way with every child, but we get creative when we work on perseveration. Great. And then she went on to write another question. She said, haircut mom again. Love this. Can we use an obsessive/preferred item activity as a reinforcer?
Yes.
She goes on to talk about, do we run the risk of a meltdown if he doesn't get it, or reinforce the obsession? She said, of course, my ABA smart, neurotypical 8-year-old used the haircut obsession as a reinforcer to get her brother to play with her. If you play with me, I'll let you cut the hair of my doll. This was 2 weeks ago, and I just found out. Our basic rule has always been no destruction of toys, but in this case, he had the okay from the owner, his sister. Should we allow this kind of trading to go on between siblings?
I love it.
This reinforces my concern that my son can easily be manipulated by anyone who knows his preferences. Preferences can change. How can we train him to maintain his logic despite the temptations? And thank you. Don't you love this question? It's power packed.
Not only do I love this question, I love that 8-year-old.
I know.
Oh my God.
Do we have a job for her in a couple of years?
That sibling is amazing.
She's on it.
Yes, she is. So she's using a principle called the Premack principle. This is wonderful. You should absolutely use his preferences as a reinforcer. And yes, so you don't want to just use that one thing as a reinforcer, because then he will just continue to work for that. And but you should absolutely, and what I would do is, if that's a very powerful reinforcer, cutting hair, you may want to just reserve that for very difficult tasks. So tasks that really require a powerful reinforcer. I love what your daughter did, or I'm assuming
I think it is a daughter, yes.
I just love that, because that's so appropriate. She's not, come play with my doll. The game itself could be cutting hair. I remember my daughter doing that with her friends when they were young. So that is perfectly fine. Don't worry about it becoming obsessive, because, in fact, the more we use a reinforcer, the more we satiate on it and move on to other reinforcers. It does have an obsessive nature, but then everything that is reinforcing to us is of somewhat of an obsessive nature to us. Like, if you really love donuts, you're going to end up eating a lot of donuts, and it becomes almost obsessive. Yeah. So we tend to want our reinforcers, and that's just the way it is. This is a reinforcer for him. I would not prevent it from happening at all times, first of all. Secondly, didn't we just last time decide he should become a hairstylist? And what are we talking about? At some point, he's going to have to learn how to do this right.
Right.
So yeah, I generally, let me use another example, Shannon, which people ask me all the time, which is computer, right? A lot of kids are just obsessed with computer. Yeah. But the truth is, I don't limit it. In fact, I go with the social norm. 10 years ago, maybe I would have said no computer, because not every kid was on the computer. But as time changed, you come to realize that if you're not on the computer, you're odd. Right? You have to be on the computer. In fact, you need to know these games that you play with other kids. And so then it became, okay, let's just do 1 hour or whatever it is. So you always have to look at the child's age, circumstances, what their friends are doing. That's what sets the norm, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to fit our kids into the norm. So you always want to look around and say, okay, so what? And another portion of this question that was very good as well was, will this cause meltdowns? Yes, it will. And that's fantastic, because it gives you the opportunity to work with a meltdown. Yeah. It gives you the opportunity to teach him to transition in and out without meltdowns. Yeah. And if you were to avoid situations, you'd never have that opportunity.
That's a really good thing for all of us to hear, because a lot of times when we get to ABA, it's because there's been a period of time when we have sidestepped every possible thing we can, so that we will not get to the meltdown.
Right.
And what happens is that the ABA therapists come in and they create circumstances which will bring up the meltdown, and that brings up anxiety in the parents. But what happens is they're there working with us, and they show us that it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is how we make progress, and then the meltdowns go away. But we've been used to walking down a different sidewalk, because that one has something they'll perseverate on.
Right. And then by doing that, the child learns that their meltdown is very effective.
And powerful.
Yeah. And also, my philosophy is anything that's related to fear, you have to do it.
Yes.
Right? So we tend to, I always tell parents, don't walk on eggshells around your child. Like, that's just ridiculous. The child ends up determining our behavior versus the other way around.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm a pre-K intensive teacher for autistic 3 and 4-year-olds. I have one student that bites his nails obsessively. He chews on the ends of his fingers until they bleed. He does this all day long. Every time I look at him, his fingers are in his mouth. He also puts blocks, cars, and toys in his mouth and chews on them. What can I do to get him to stop this behavior?
So as a BCBA, the first thing that I would do is complete an FBA, or a functional behavior assessment, because before we can develop a treatment plan and a set of strategies, we need to know what the function is or why this child is biting and mouthing objects in his fingers. So that's something where, being in the school district, hopefully this teacher has access to a BCBA who can help provide this functional behavior assessment to figure out what the function is. And some potential results of that assessment could be, maybe the child is doing this for a sensory reason. It just feels good internally. And in that case, we would want to look for replacement behaviors. So maybe giving that child a chewy tube or some jewelry to chew on instead of his fingers, or giving snacks like carrots and cucumbers that are crunchy and maybe give a little bit of that sensation instead of chewing. Another option might be that this behavior serves an attention function. So maybe the child's trying to get attention from others by biting his fingers and nails. And in that case, you would want to teach that kid to gain attention by tapping others. In the meantime, while you're waiting for an FBA, that functional behavior assessment, there are a couple things that you can do. What I would suggest is looking for times when the child isn't engaging in that mouthing and biting behavior. And it sounds like it's happening really often, so it might be hard to find those times, but maybe even if it's just snack time. Okay, his hands are out of his mouth when he's eating. That's something that you can build on and work on, and you would want to work on giving that child a lot of praise, a lot of reinforcement, a lot of good things when his hands aren't in his mouth, and then start building on those opportunities. Say, for example, the child doesn't put his fingers in his mouth when he's playing with blocks. You can give him blocks at other times and encourage that appropriate behavior.
Next question. My 4-year-old has autism and he's high functioning. He is currently obsessed with his toy trains and stims with them by watching the wheels and by repetitively moving them back and forth. He will do this as much as he can. Should I remove them altogether, or what would Dr. Doreen suggest?
Yeah, I would probably at this point remove them altogether, unless there's someone there who can actually teach him how to play. And this is very, very common with our kids. A lot of our kids, when they first come in, the play with cars is like this, you know, where they're looking at the wheels, or it's like this, where they're turning the wheels. And that is repetitive, rote, stereotypical behavior, self-stimulatory behavior. And we stop it. And every time the child does that, we just simply say, no, play with it right, and put it on the ground and start to teach pretend play and actual play going up and down bridges and roads and so on and so forth. So unless there's someone there, I would try to get rid of things with wheels just for now. The whole concept with self-stimulatory stuff is it becomes so rote that the child is so ingrained in doing that they are not paying attention to anything else in the environment. So that's why you sort of want to reduce those types of things, because you want the child to have attention and access to everything in their environment. If a child does that, by the way, they're probably also going to be staring at ceiling fans, anything that goes around in circles and so on. So you just have to be aware of that. And again, you know, we don't know yet from a sensory perspective why some of our kids are so interested in things that are circular motion. Some of our kids, we don't know. And so having said that, you know, if the child is able to minimize their need to do these types of things to very, very discrete periods of time that are limited, and they're easily redirectable, excuse me. So in other words, they're not spending their whole day doing this, then I would say you don't stress out about it too much, because it's fulfilling some need that we're not sure about yet. But if it starts to prevent the child from paying attention to anything else, if the child gets upset when you try to interrupt this pattern, if the child would rather do this than look at a person or interact with a person, then yeah, you would want to try to eliminate that.
Okay. All right, and I gotta pick which one. Okay, hi, Dr. Doreen and Shannon. My 4.8-year-old son loves playing pretend doctor. He has a toy doctor suitcase that he plays with every day, and I do mean every day. It's great because he uses his language and he even says, now is your turn to be the doctor. After he's done being the doctor, I put the toy away, but it's visible. So since he can't reach, he'll say, I want my doctor's suitcase. Sometimes I hide it and he'll start asking for it. When I tell him I don't know where where it is, he starts getting upset and saying, oh no, is it lost? We need to find it, etc. I feel like it's so routinely is the first toy he asks for every day, and sometimes plays with it twice a day. He plays with other toys too, but most of them I have to make him pick. Should I be concerned about him being obsessed with this one toy? And thank you so much. I love the show. We love you.
Yeah, we do. That's such a cute question, too. I can just imagine this little guy insisting on his doctor's suitcase. That's adorable.
Get it on video.
Yeah, seriously. Oh no, we have to look for it. That's just so cute. I'm
that's
sorry.
sort of problem solving, right?
It is absolutely. I mean, this is choose your. I mean, talk about this is a fabulous
Quality
situation.
Problem. Quality
Good Lord,
problem.
I love it. Yeah, and I apologize that I'm laughing because I know in the moment you're probably pretty worried about it. But I just think that some of the things our kids do are so adorable. So a couple of different things to think about here. You don't have to hide the thing. You can just simply tell him, I want you to play with something else first, and let him. It's like any other child. Imagine if it's like a child who wants technology, or a child who wants a doll, or a child who wants a board game. It doesn't matter. You want to kind of teach every child to have access to other things, or have a more broader array of things that they play with. So just tell him first this, then we'll play doctor. And I'm sure it'll be forced to begin with, but you'll at least give him exposure to a multitude of different types of activities, and then he might, over time, find interest in something else. On the other hand, he may not, and that's no big deal either. Find activities that are similar to his doctor suitcase. You might put together a fireman suitcase, or something else, policeman suitcase, and do that with him. I mean, everybody has their own interests, and this is a good problem to have. He likes pretend play more than he likes other things. That's perfectly fine. So don't worry about this too much. I do. The importance of teaching our kids other games is because sometimes they won't have kids around them who want to play what they want to play. And sharing and turn-taking and paying attention to other people's cues and interests are extremely important at social activities. So the best way, sounds like he's very high-functioning, give him a multitude of new types of suitcases, so he has an array, and then also give him a lot of other things that are not suitcases, so he has to learn to deal with those as well, and then have him practice those with other kids, so he's doing an equal balance of both.
Okay.
My 4-year-old started to do old ceiling fan obsessions meltdowns again. He hasn't done this in years. He could stare at them all day. He carries a high chair with him in every room so he could pull the string to turn them on and off. He pretty much climbs anything he can find. I'm scared he will hurt himself. I don't know what to do to distract him with this behavior. I did notice before his fixation with fans, it started in the beginning of spring. He got allergies and became more hyperactive, and he's on allergy meds, but it hasn't helped him. Please help. By the way, I love your show and I watch it every day, and we love you back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you this, but when anything turns into a habit, you sort of have to block it and then gradually re-expose the individual to environmental factors. So, like, in other words, what I'm saying is we have to prevent him from doing this, and then we can actually gradually put him around ceiling fans under controlled environments, and not allow him to obsess on them. So behaviorally, the easiest way to do that, given that you're not going to follow him around all day long, is to remove the ceiling fans or somehow prevent them from working. Like maybe electrically manipulate the electricity so that that switch that turns them on doesn't turn on, and you can only turn them on with, let's say, or maybe not even that, just like don't turn them on for a week. And basically, he will lose his interest in that, and then two things will happen. One is you have to eventually reinstate them and prevent him. So before you reinstate the use of the ceiling fans, we need to now teach him something else to do so that he is engaged in some other activity that could potentially fulfill this desire to see, I don't know exactly what the function of this is, but from my particular perspective, this is a very common self-stimulatory behavior that happens, and it's not just within autism, by the way. It's sort of a repetitive type of behavior that happens in obsessive compulsive individuals. So to me personally, it increases with anxiety. And I think that you need to try to figure out kind of whether it was an allergic period or whatever it was. You need to kind of look at what instigated this return. Usually when our kids start to get a little anxious or overstressed or like there's too much on their plate, they start doing things that they used to do. It's sort of a fall back into a compulsive behavior that made them feel good. And by the way, that's not just our kids. We all do that, right? It's like overeating when we're stressed or whatever it is, right? So I would say basically you should stop the fans, remove them or turn them off electrically, and then engage him, because otherwise the thing that will happen is he'll find some other thing that rotates, like a record player or I don't know, something else, and he'll start visually self-stimming on something else. So make sure that you don't allow that to happen. And then you gradually bring back the one fan at a time and turn the fan on for 3 minutes and have him do something else. If he starts looking at it again or obsessing, turn it off. He can only have you basically make it so that the fan will remain on as long as he's engaged with, let's say, TV or an iPad or something that is also interesting to him.
Okay, but easier if you go ahead and have a way that blocks it.
You need to start by blocking it anyway, because it sounds like there's one in every room.
But just saying, it's a lot of times parents, we misunderstand and think that it's a conversation at the switch and saying no.
No.
It's so much easier. It's so much easier to like turn off the power supply to it, so that you can't, like, he can flick the switch and it's not going to do anything, or to have it removed. I just had to have a ceiling fan removed because we were hitting hands on it while playing VR games. How pathetic are we? But but it's not that difficult. And if you go to like Lowe's, they sell these flush lights that are LED that are really inexpensive. They're like $5, and then you can have the ceiling fan put back in later on. It's a very like minimal thing. It's not the big thing that you think. But if you make it still so that there's a discussion around the switch, your life's going to be miserable.
Absolutely right.
So make a way so that it, like, no matter what happens, he can't do it when you're not there. That there's no way for you know, whatever it is to make it do that.
Right.
Because I'm just telling you, parents, that doesn't occur to us. We're like, oh well, how am I going to convince him not to do it? It has to be shut off.
Or just removed.
Or removed, so that it isn't a possibility, and that you're not the person in charge of it on a minute-by-minute basis. And you know, he will want it to come back on.
Right, so he will have a little tantrum. Let's just talk about that, because the switch won't work or it's not there anymore, but just ignore it, walk away from that.
Yeah, it's not a discussion.
It'll go away.
Because we want
fast.
to talk about it. You know, you can't be watching that. You know, it's
No
the womp 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 womp, right? So we don't need to do that. That's wasted breath. It actually makes it worse.
That is absolutely right.
Moving on. I scrolled up a little bit. Can you recommend any medications that could help with my child's obsessions and also will help him to sleep? He currently takes Intuniv and Statera in the morning.
Statera and Intuniv,
and melatonin at night. He used to take risperidone, but we are now not taking it.
Yeah. Well, if you're already on Intuniv and Statera, that's pretty high level, and I don't want to interfere with what it is your physician feels is appropriate. So I can't really comment on that, although you prompted me to mention that I'm in the process of speaking with a lovely developmental pediatrician. Did I tell you this, Shannon? I'm very, very excited about this, actually, and I hope that it happens, but I won't say her name yet because she's not on board with CARD yet, but it's a very wonderful lady who has been a developmental pediatrician for a very long time and is very involved in the field of autism, does all sorts of assessments and so on, and is also a BCBA, which is very, very, very rare. I think there's 2 in the country.
Wow.
Who are MDs and BCBAs, but to have a developmental pediatrician who's a BCBA, and she has asked to join CARD, and I'm just out of my mind
Yay.
excited about it. Yes. So hopefully we will soon have a physician to consult with our patients.
Oh, I love that.
Which is beautiful.
It is beautiful.
So I won't comment on the Intuitive and the Stratera, and you're going to stay on those and talk to your physician about that. In terms of the melatonin for sleep, I've said this many times and I'll say it again. Melatonin on its own, I don't find to be effective. I have a very, very wonderful alternative that I've used for many years, and you can order it on Amazon. You can buy it in a lot of different places. I think I'm responsible for this thing becoming big, I swear. It's called Tranquil Sleep, and it's spectacular. It's a combination of melatonin, 5-HTP, which is tryptophan, and theanine. So I really, really recommend this thing because the combination is spectacular, and it comes in, it's chewable and it tastes good, and it comes in 3 milligram chewables. Yeah. So you can use 3 milligrams for a young child, and past the age of 12 or so, you can use 6 milligrams even.
Okay, remarkable.